The thing that made me angriest about the use of sales development was getting a prospect on the line and then passing them off to a client. And they're like, no, I don't want to talk to them. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, they're the right person and they're at the right company, but I don't think they want to buy from me in the next 90 days. So I don't want to waste my time. Come on, man. You're like, man, what you're saying is wasting your time is really just good sales habits. And as a salesperson, what's better? Them inbounding to you on the same day they inbound to your competitor, or you reaching out to them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months before they're thinking about the thing, and you get to stay in touch with them and share some things and have a few calls with them so that when they're in market, they think of you first.
Welcome back to the B2B Playbook, where we believe that great go-to-market is about people, not platforms, and we see that belief being challenged by modern outbound. When predictable revenue hit the scene, it changed SaaS forever. It gave sales teams a system, it gave the SDR a name, but along the way, something got lost. The playbook became process, and process became volume, and that volume drowned out the very people it was meant to reach. In this episode, Collin Stewart, CEO of Predictable Revenue and the author of The Terrifying Art of Finding Customers, joins Adem Manderovic from Closed Circuit Selling and myself, of course, to unpack what Outbound got right, what the market misread, and what comes next. Together, we're going to explore how to rebuild Outbound for 2026. We're going to look at how to trade brute force prospecting for long-term nurture, look at the intelligence of signals, and how we can align every part of the commercial system. Collin, it is an honor to have you on this show. Thank you so much for joining us.
George, what an intro. Thank you so much for having me.
Adem, I'd love to say it's an honor for you to join us too, but you're on here pretty regularly. I do really like you. I love what you have to say. I'm just not going to say it's an honor.
Thank you so much.
It reminds me of my brother's speech at my wedding, and it was something along the lines of, there aren't many nice things you can say about my brother. And then he walked off the podium. My dad and I fell over laughing. Everybody else was like, what is happening?
That is amazing. No, in all seriousness, Adem, thank you very much for joining us too. We greatly respect everything that you have to say and what you bring to the table too. I think it's going to make for a really fruitful discussion between two people that are immensely respected in the sales world and I really look up to. Collin, I'd love to kick off with you. And I think a lot of our audience should know Predictable Revenue, and they will know it as the book that defined SaaS Outbound. And for those that don't, could you please take us back through the journey a little bit, look at how you built Voltage CRM, how Aaron Ross came on board, and how that evolved into the empire that we know as Predictable Revenue today?
Love it. And I'll give you the short version of the evolution of the book, and then I'll show you where I entered the chat and became the CEO of a book in around 2014. So Predictable Revenue is a book written about Aaron's experience at Salesforce in around 2005, 2006. It was a couple of years there. He wrote a few books and then he decided to write about his experience building Salesforce's first sales development team. And I think they added something like 100 million in revenue back in 2000. I feel like it was 2006. And so he wrote the book in 2009, 2010. It came out in 2011. It became very quickly a bestseller. You couldn't walk around San Francisco without bumping into somebody who knew Predictable Revenue or was trying to implement it or was like, hey, do you know Aaron? That kind of thing. Like he was the celebrity in San Francisco for quite a while. And I mean, I think the nature of it was every company was using sales development. And in 2012, it was really the only book on Outbound that really spelled out, hey, this is a thing that's actually working for SaaS companies. And it was this incredible channel where if you did it right, you could get 10% reply rates, 20% reply rates if you were doing a good job. Like I saw some that were like 30%, 40% reply rates. It was nuts. And so there was this huge channel and suddenly it's bringing all of these SaaS companies tons of money and hence the popularity of it. I read Aaron's book in 2012, 2013, and then the guy wrote a book about cold email. I'm a good Canadian. It seemed almost rude if I wouldn't email him. And so I sent him a cold email. And then I think we would call it social selling now, but back in 2012, it was called being your internet stalker. And I followed him on webinars. I found his phone number, his email address, his Gmail online. And I just kept asking him questions and following him around. And eventually he's like, all right, let's I'm tired of answering all your questions and not getting any value out of it. Let's find a way to work together. And what that looked like was our two companies coming together in 2014. And I'd started Voltage and I had already shut down Voltage. Voltage was a CRM system that one company bought. A bunch of people used it and loved it, but it was really just one company. It wasn't very good. I was just the king idiot of the company. And the short version of that story is I built something that I wanted. And I thought I had this insight that sales productivity was being forgotten about in the transition from on-prem or on your computer CRM into cloud CRM. And I feel like that insight was correct, but how I applied it was incorrect. And I had went out and asked a bunch of companies, hey, isn't my idea smart? And they all went, yeah, sure. And what I heard was, yeah, you're a genius. I went, woo. Then I built the CRM. And then I went back to them like, look, I built the thing. And they're like, gold star, good for you. Leave me alone. And nobody paid for it. And so I met Aaron in the transition from realizing how far up my head had been and pivoting into what turned into Carb.io. And along that journey, I'd used predictable revenue to book customer development interviews for myself so that I could figure out what is the right direction. And we started realizing that folks that had read Aaron's book or companies that were trying to implement cold email really needed help. And we started by servicing them as an agency in around 2012, 2013. And then we ended up building some software around it called Carb.io, which we can go into. But that's the genesis of Aaron to predictable revenue and Voltage. And then what we came together to build was the platform called Carb.io, which was a cold email tool. Back, I think Outreach was already around. SalesLoft was still doing their scrape emails off of LinkedIn thing, hadn't yet pivoted into Cadence. And we thought the right way to approach that was to bootstrap it, which hindsight, I think if I was 40 back then and had all of this experience, I probably could have made it work. But back then I had too many mistakes that I needed to make before I could have built a successful company. And so we built a services business around the idea first to validate the market. That went really well. We went 0 to $1 million in revenue as a services business in a year with 70% profit margins, which was wild. Also a sign that we weren't really paying ourselves any money whatsoever. And we just pushed all that back into developing the product. And from there, once we had the product, we made the mistake of pushing it out way too quickly. And so I wanted to get 0 to $1 million in revenue as quickly as possible. And I optimized for that. And so we went 0 to $1 million in 3 months, which is great. $1 million in ARR, I should clarify, which is amazing if you can keep that trajectory going. And the mistake that we made was we pushed too hard too quickly and we brought too many users on the platform that just weren't going to be happy with the service. And the UI did the thing, the product kind of did the thing, but when you bring too many people, too many customers on to a platform that was already struggling, it just collapsed. You would click send email and it would take 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks at our worst for the email to actually make it out the other end, which doesn't seem possible, but it is.
I appreciate how candid you are, Collin. I think that's really refreshing for everyone to hear. With all the great success that you've had, there's obviously setbacks and lessons learned along the way. And I think that's so nice and refreshing for everyone to hear. So thank you for that. At the point where you did combine forces to build predictable revenue, what was the main problem you were really trying to solve for organizations? Was it just that they were lacking structure? They were really struggling to have conversations with the market? What was the core problem you were trying to fix?
Obviously, it was revenue. Everything we do ties to revenue. But back in 2013, the companies didn't even believe that you could you could send cold email. People would just tell me that's not going to work. I'm like, well, it's working really well for me. When I was building the CRM system, my job to pay the bills was cold calling for an investment advisor. He paid me $1,000 a month. And I was like, hey man, I'm grinding this for a lead a week, maybe, and not even good ones. I'm like, I could do this with email and way less time. Can I give it a try? And he's like, it'd never work. I'm like, okay. And so I quit there. And within 6 months, we were at $500,000 ARR on the services business. Part of it was like, you asked, what were they hiring us to do? What were they trying to figure out? They were trying to figure out, will it even work? There was so much disbelief around, you can do that part of it was just like, nobody knew how. There was no tools, there was no information, there was no guides, there was no books. There was one, maybe two books out there. Brian Krusenberger had a newsletter. Aaron had his newsletter and his book. They did a bunch of webinars together. I'm sure there were a few others, but there weren't a ton of folks that had real deep cold email knowledge that I ran into. And I probably interviewed 50 sales leaders looking for stuff like this and couldn't track it down. And so people were just looking for information. They were looking for help. They were ultimately looking for revenue. But the initial people were like, hey, let's prove that this works so that I can build a sales development team internally.
Fascinating. That's really interesting that, yeah, back then people didn't believe that was a channel. I'm a little bit younger than you guys. It's hard to believe that was the case, but Adam tells me all the time. Adam, I would love to hear from your perspective. I mean, your first encounters with email as a challenge, like when did you start using it? And then also I'd love to know, like, how did you come across predictable revenue?
Good question. And as we spoke about with Collin on his show, in Australia, we couldn't really do it that way. And I think that the way that we did it was more just pushing them back to where a live conversation could exist instead of okay, let me rewind. How we were always taught was from like heavy business development from people that would have grown up in the 80s and 90s, was to literally send like a PowerPoint presentation type 3-page email, literally selling the kitchen sink. And if you didn't do that, you hadn't done your job properly. So I guess my time coming up through, it would have been after Fitness First, it would have been at EPAC in financial services. I noticed that we could just ask very similar to what Aaron was doing and suggested in the book, and which is what Collin ended up doing as part of the services, literally just asking, is this the best channel to reach you? Then I noticed if we didn't have to sell the way we were being taught to sell, it was much easier to open a dialogue, which my understanding of what the problem that Collin and Aaron solved was actually building a two-way dialogue, not necessarily how the market took the book's interpretation in a different direction and pushed everything towards measuring meetings as the measure. My interpretation was that both of you were solving a problem to have an open two-way dialogue with the right person on the right channel, but I don't think that the wider perception actually took it that way. Because from the outside looking in, to answer your question, George, as you and I have discussed on probably, I don't know how many podcasts, maybe 50, the outside looking in, people would see what was happening in the US with your movement and then go, okay, so that changed the measurement to being meetings. That then changed the tools. That then changed the behaviors, right? But I don't think that was actually yours or Aaron's intention at the start at all, really. I think what you were solving the right business problem. The market took it another way and then they ran with it, and that enabled venture capital to pour money into building tools to solve the problem of meetings as measure, which created another niche market we see today, which is still trying to solve product timing and market insights, because now the way that George and I teach teams to sell is completely washed out of the market. But I think that the natural evolution of what you actually did is what we're doing and what we've discussed with yourself on your podcast, which is like market validations as measures, and then what other pillars should make sense from there.
I'm building on what you said there. I know one of the things that drove Aaron crazy in the early days was the idea that an account-based sales development approach or an account-based approach was contrary to predictable revenue. I think that's an idea. I don't know if I would say he regretted it, but I think he wished he created more clarity around about the original book, because predictable revenue, if you haven't read it, I won't fault you. The book's old by now, but there's two of my favorite ideas that came from it were, one, you can send emails to prospected people. This was new. It doesn't sound new now, but it was new. And two, if you specialize your sales roles, it makes it a lot easier to get maximum productivity out of your salespeople. This brought the factory floor, to to the sales world, which probably could have used a little bit more structure to it. It really made everybody rethink the full cycle AE role, which I appreciated, because you've got your people that know how to cold call, you get them to focus on cold calling. The folks that can close, get them closing. The folks that want to farm and be account managers, let them be account managers. And I loved that idea. Also, the cold email was an amazing hack. But I do think the one thing that I know that I always heard Aaron battling with was, it's not about the list. It's about the accounts and using cold email as a method for reaching people on your target account list. And I think that's one thing that I know he regretted not making it more clear in the book.
I second that. And I think that even people that have even taken what I've said of what your and Aaron work, even from the early stuff, when I used to tag you in posts years ago, I don't even know if you remember, I think people took me out of context. But what I was actually trying to convey is the market took it a certain way, and a certain portion of the market maybe bastardized that further than what was intended, whereas they should have actually just looked at the core fundamentals of the problem that you solved, and they wouldn't have looked at it that way. So I just wanted to also clear that up.
Totally. I take no offense to anybody who posted about the methodology doesn't work for me. Like, there's no skin off my back. I didn't write the book. I own the company that owns the book, but I'm pretty eyes wide open about the impact and where it was good and where it was misused. And I think the thing that frustrated me the most was in 2021, 2022, all the people taking a dump on the model and the methodology. And I don't want to sound too much like the NRA here, but it was one of those, you're taking a dump on the gun, but it's not the model. The people were misusing the sales development model because the companies had millions and millions of dollars to spend, and they were in this growth at all costs mindset. And like, if you misuse the model, is it the model's fault? You know, there's all these SDRs that say, oh, it doesn't work. It's, no, it didn't work at your company because you were selling something that was worth $3,000 a year. And you can't have a human that you're paying $100,000 a year selling something that you're only going to make $3,000 a year on for 2.5, 3 years. You need a lot of deals across the line in order for that to make sense. And that was one era. That was one kind of era of social media where I was like, I don't really enjoy having the same conversation over and over again. And I've never been a big social media fan. I don't think scoring internet points adds any value in my life. And so I haven't really done it. And so I engaged a little bit, but I just ran out of fucks to give. Pardon my French.
I know George will have a question, but may I just ask this extension question? Did it surprise even you that the market took it one way from more than how it was written, and their perception was what they were dumping on? Like, if they actually understood the problem that you were solving, or you're both solving and even solving from your sales floor, they may have even looked at it with a clearer lens, but they weren't.
It's hard to have a conversation with the market in general because there's so many people that were dumping on the book that clearly hadn't even read the book. And so you're not really having a conversation. Everybody's just trying to score internet points and find the thing that'll go viral so that my name gets out there more times than everybody else's. And to me, that's just not I'm sure from a marketing perspective and selling PR perspective, it probably would have been a better thing for me to do, but it's just not something that I'm interested in doing.
There's ways to go about it and there's ways not to go about it. As people might remember, my challenges to Keenan and Gap. But yeah, George, did you have your further question?
I'd like to just follow on from that and say the SDR profession kind of evolved from that. And you spoke a bit how sales needed a bit more structure and there was specialization of roles. What was the original intention behind the sales development role? What were you hoping it would really unlock?
I'll be clear, like, I didn't write the book. I had no hopes. I read the book and I went, oh shit, this is a much better way of doing it than cold calling. And so what I think it unlocked for companies was the ability to reach them in a way that they hadn't been able to before. For salespeople, it made them more money. For companies, it made them more money. And so in many ways, I don't fault folks for chasing sales development or predictable revenue or, misapplying it, misusing it. Everybody was doing it. There was so much money to go around that growth at all costs was the mindset. It's the I think if you think of the technology adoption lifecycle, I know Jeffrey Moore's book popularized it, but it came from farming and the use of technology in the ag world, and something you beauties will absolutely know super well from your time working out in the fields, in the banana farms. But the innovators get the majority of the benefit from the technology. The early adopters get quite a bit of it. The early majority, they're going to get a little bit less value out of it. The laggards, the late majority, et cetera. You get less value the later you are to the channel. And I think the thing that is different than the talc is that the costs go up. It's like sitting down at the poker table. If you're an innovator, then you're playing like 10 cent, 20 cent blinds with your buddies. But by the time it gets to the early majority, or even like the laggards right now, it's 30, 60, no limit poker. And you're like, man, you better have serious bank if you want to sit down at this table. Because candidly, in 2025, you absolutely can still get value out of sales development. You got to have a strong product market fit and you got to know what you're doing. But it is not like it was in 2012 when all you needed were a bag of emails and yet another mail merge, and you could go nuts and book 10, 20 meetings a week, no problem. So much different world than it is today.
Do you feel, having spoken to us about our model on your podcast, the next evolution of maybe doing that the right way should start with market validation as the measure?
Yeah, 100%. We used to offer a service called market validation, where we would come up with 40, 50 different hypotheses, and we'd map them all out, and we'd use Outbound to validate the hypotheses. And this would tell you as a startup, where do I focus? Where do I not focus? What segments are working really well and not? And like, it was developed here at Predictable Revenue, and Aaron had a hand in it. It started with his, I can't remember, I think it was his niche matrix. I started using his niche matrix to onboard our clients. And then my buddy Kenny McKenzie, who was working at PR at the time, went crazy with it and brought in the jobs to be done and a bunch of other kind of granularity. And so our market fit, we've got a matrix that we use to plan out campaigns, and not so much anymore, but the framework, and not so much for onboarding anymore. It used to be this like 4-hour workshop we would do. But then the idea and teaching people to think in that way is still something that we use to this day. So yes, I love the idea of market validation. I love the idea of looking for where should we focus our time. And I think just the thing that made me angriest about the use of sales development was getting a client or getting a prospect on the line and then passing them off to a client. And they're like, no, I don't want to talk to them. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, they're the right person and they're at the right company, but I don't think they want to buy from me in the next 90 days. So I don't want to waste my time.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, man. Like, that to me is just it's just a waste. It's just a huge waste. And that was the most frustrating part. I had that conversation so many times where there's meetings, there's pipeline, there's things that you can be doing. And people are like, nah, it's not good enough. It doesn't meet my bar. I'm like, it doesn't cost you anything more to go and have this call. They're like, I don't want to waste my time. You're like, man, what you're saying is wasting your time is really just good sales habits. And as a salesperson, what's better? Them inbounding to you on the same day they inbound to your competitor, or you reaching out to them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months before they're thinking about the thing, and you get to stay in touch with them and share some things and have a few calls with them so that when they're in market, they think of you first. One of these things is more work. The other one is what my clients wanted to do. And it wasn't just my clients, it was everybody I seemed to talk to. Because the methodology worked so well, I think we became greedy and lazy and selfish. And it was all about protecting my time and not wanting to, waste it, theoretically, doing good sales work. And so I think there was a lot of good sales habits that were lost. And there's a lot of folks that grew up as SDRs in the last 5 years that probably don't know what an actual paper Rolodex is, and haven't gone like physically door knocking. I'm not going to say you're not a real salesperson if you haven't gone physically door knocking, but there is something that changes in you when you're physically going into another space and you got to show up and put your brave face on and pretend that you're enjoying it and try and get your way past the gatekeeper, like the literal gatekeeper. Like, it's just a different experience.
It's interesting, Collin, because I think it even goes further than that. I think we've got a layer, and I've said this many times. I don't know if you've listened to any of our other stuff. I've been saying this for 6 years. We've got a layer of C-suite, marketers and sellers that have never seen what good looks like, because the market now believes that solving timing and product road mapping is impossible. They've only ever been pushed by a bastardization of yours and Aaron's model, right? Where they think the reward is the meeting, but the reward is getting the timing to win the deal. And if you can also go further than that and go, hey, but Collin, you guys aren't where you need to be right now, but you would be if you could do X, Y, Z. If 5 clients say that, you've got your product road mapping mapped out for 12 to 24 months. And if not what you and I are saying is true, then why do companies like Winter and Market Research exist? Like, it should be, if you're doing that portion of the role in sales, then and able to speak to a wider portion of the market, you can also then build that front-ended rapport, build those relationships, go back to them at the right time, and unlock what marketing should be doing, which is doing the creative stuff instead of making them do hapless amounts of lead gen that they know that it won't work. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Can I just jump in and ask then, sorry, the issue then, is it the comp structure? Is it the measurements? Like, what are they really getting wrong that is stopping the people on the front line from behaving in a way that makes common sense, right? Like, marketers, it's been hammered home forever. Like, not everyone is in market to buy. You got future buyers, you got current buyers. We got to split our time and budget accordingly, and we've got to serve both. Why is it that salespeople aren't afforded the luxury of, okay, we're speaking to someone, they're not a buyer right now, but why shouldn't we catalog everything about them and come back to them at the right time? What's stopping them from acting that way?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, it starts with leadership in terms of where your focus is and how you're measuring the team and what your goals are and what you understand as a sales leader. And so it starts there, and then it goes to, I think just salespeople don't realize, some don't realize that you should be doing this. And then I think there are those but I think most of the folks that I've talked to, they realize they should be doing it, but they don't have a good system or process in place in order to do it. And this is the frustration, the argument, the fight that I was trying to have getting the idea for the 4 funnels out into the world. And part of the book we can talk about a little bit later, but basically it was that, like, hey, there's no project in the next 90 days attitude that really drove me crazy enough to start writing some things down. And I think the biggest chunk there is that if you're a salesperson and you've got this deal that they're not ready to buy now, but they're probably a good fit, where do you put them in your CRM? Right? Do you have a pipeline for your nurture opportunities? Do you have an account list workflow? Do you have a view built out? The paths are easy to pave, but I think too many people don't realize how to set them up and how to pave them. And in 5 or 10 minutes in a HubSpot or a Salesforce, you can set these views up very easily. And my favorite thing to do, because it freaks people out, is delete close last. There's no close last in my CRM. Actually, I don't have a CRM. I deleted Salesforce and HubSpot this year, and it felt great. Not because they're terrible tools. We just went from 30 folks down to 4. So don't really need it. But I love deleting close last. And then I'll add a new status called close last nurture, which means you're committing to have a conversation with this company monthly or quarterly. And if you don't, well, that's a paddling. And then if there's no chance you could ever work with this company ever, we have close last FOAD, which stands for loosely leave me alone and perish. So I'll let you work out what the acronym actually is, but it's something along those lines. And the reason why deals get stuck in folks' pipeline for so long is they don't have a place to put them, because they don't want to close last it, because they're afraid it's going to go away forever. And the solution is close last nurture, and then you duplicate your current pipeline view and you call it nurture. And then you change one filter that says active opportunities, and you just filter it down to status close last nurture. And there you go. You get your 4 funnel system, or at least the genesis of the 4 funnel system right then and there. But to answer your question, why don't they do it? Is one, I think they want to do it, but they don't realize how easy it could be in their CRM. And I think organizations don't realize how easy it could be, and they don't have this mindset, because it is a very different mindset than we have one pipeline and we work that pipeline, and everything goes in that pipeline. I've got my gloves in that pipeline. I've got my opportunities. I got my nurture ops. I've got my customer success. I've got my upsell. I've got my this. I got my that. I got pick up the kids at 4:00 in my pipeline. You're like, there's just everything in there. And when there's everything in there, you can't really measure the volume because you don't know what's what. You can't measure the velocity because deals aren't moving because you've got follow-up opportunities that you're going to touch for another 18 months. And then your conversion rates from stage to stage are meaningless because you've got all this crap that's just sitting there. Even if you did define them properly, you have 4 pipelines sitting in one. It's very challenging to keep an eye and measure what's actually happening in there. So I'm a big fan of specializing those funnels and going with the 4-funnel system in order to just create this clarity, get to this David Allen mind like water flow state where you don't have to worry about juggling all the deals in your head. You trust your system of organization, and your system of organization takes care of you. And as long as you keep ticking away at it, you'll be fine. And the point when you can forget about your pipeline as a salesperson is the point where you can start focusing on your customers, on the calls, and really showing up and going home. That's important to be able to go home and have a beer and not worry about, oh, did I forget to follow up on those 8 opportunities? No, I got my system. I trust that it's going to work.
Love what you said there, because I would say market misconception, measurement, and ability. But ability is tied to the market misconception of the measurement of the role. And now we've got that layer of people that believe that's impossible. They don't know how to split it out that way. George nearly had a panic attack when I set up our version of CRO School CRM in that way, to have it sectioned out by timing where we could actually do it that way. And I said, we don't have a 360 view in HubSpot, man. He's like, what? I'm like, bro, just work with me a little bit and you'll understand. You need to have this type of view of what we're measuring from the market. And so I love what you said there.
Yeah, it was fascinating for me. And look, I do think you can build these kinds of things out in CRMs and HubSpot as well. But working very closely with Adem, doing the process myself, seeing how those systems don't actually allow you to do things very quickly. And I know, Collin, you say you've got to slow down first before you go fast, right? You've got to build the system first, and then you can go a bit more into autopilot mode. And once Adem had built that system for us and told us what it should be, I was like, oh, we could do this in HubSpot. But then actually the execution within that platform itself was just like, it just was slow. It was clunky, would have massively slowed a salesperson down from what they really needed to get done. That's probably why like people have such a hard time getting their sales staff to enter in that valuable data, which is why marketing is always pissed off with sales, because we can't close that feedback loop. Maybe these systems just aren't designed for that process. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
I think what happened with CRM is it used to be something that us salespeople owned. And when you're responsible for something, you're going to build your own productivity system flow into it. When it went up into the cloud, now it's my sales managers or my marketing managers' tool for collecting their data, which means we're going to take their process and we're going to have to follow that. And salespeople aren't the most conformist of job roles, if you want to generalize. You got a lot of cowboys and lone wolves that are just not going to do it. And I think the problem with modern CRM is you take everybody's least favorite part of using a computer and you mandate it, which is filling out forms. You turned the CRM that is something that should be helpful and should be valuable to me into a form collector. And you marketing jerks put all these required fields because you want your damn information and you want your data. And now when I'm just trying to get my job done, I got to enter 86 different things that I'm not sure I know. And again, obviously I'm being a little facetious here, but I hate filling out forms. So does everybody else. That's why the CRM's out of date, is because your CRM isn't optimized for sales productivity. It's optimized for capturing all the data that everybody wants to capture. And it's definitely not just marketing's fault. Sales leadership has their role in it. Sales ops has their role in it. The CEO has their role in it. Everybody's got their role in it. But the thing that you need to figure out is, what do we want to get out of the system? And then how do we pave the path to make that as easy as possible for the people that use it the most? And that is something that you can look at any CRM system, and 99 times out of 10, it's not well set up.
Adem, you, a long time ago, I can't remember exactly where it was that you worked, but you guys essentially had a custom form built out that your team would just sit in front of, and as they made their dials and they would catalog all that information, they'd just be filling that out in front of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not like
Go further than that. When I was head of sales at LeasePlan, we were still, you'll laugh, Colin. I don't know if you've worked with any of the big FMOs, but they still work off of SAP as like a database management system, and they're trying to make it end like a CRM. So I had to lobby like the Global Strategy Council to build me like a lead board that came from the touches from the website so that I could qualify stages before it went in as a contact inside of SAP. Because that's like contact management. That's not deal stage management. So I had to build it. And thankfully, they gave me the budget to build it, because until then, I was doing everything in Power BI.
Oh,
Yeah, trying to work out what was going on.
I remember we actually did, in the early days, I did some training. Aaron and I did some training with SAP, one of their sales development teams, and they were trying to figure out how do we use Outbound? What's the best way to prospect? Our teams are super behind on X and Y. So what's the best way to do this? And we're like, okay, pull out your CRMs. And all the reps opened up their laptop and pulled out Excel. And I went, what's going on here, guys? You sell one of the biggest platforms in the world. Don't you certainly have a CRM? They're like, oh yeah, but it just takes 4 minutes to connect to the database and this. You're like, that's going to be a struggle.
Yep. It was an experience, George. You would have loved it as a marketer.
I think it's probably good for marketers to go and spend some time on the front line with sales to understand how you actually operate and the challenges that you face in terms of the systems you work with and how that ties to your own KPIs and how you're compensated as well. And I think it's really useful for marketing to do that. Maybe vice versa. Maybe sales need to look at marketing as well and see, okay, if you want us to enable you and you keep asking us for all these different things, can we have a bit more information around what's important, the timing, so we can allocate our own resources effectively? If sales have a conversation and if they haven't been able to get that timing as to like when that person's contract is up for renewal and you're asking for a 2-pager or some kind of demo, custom demo now, maybe that's not the right time. Maybe the right time is to put it in the calendar for 6 months before their contract is up. And then we can allocate our resources a little bit more effectively as well and support you guys even better. So maybe it goes both ways. I know I'm outnumbered in here, but I think it goes both ways.
I think we're getting to a place where tools like Clay can go and do all that research for you, right? I think that one of the biggest, and I've written about this quite a lot, but one of the biggest benefits of AI is it's automating away the schlep. All the things that you want that I don't want to type into a CRM, I can use a Clay agent or Clayagent to go and do that. As long as you've got the workflow and the scaffolding to connect the LLM to the platform, like I think all of this is going to change pretty dramatically very soon. I think it's in the process of changing, and yeah, the stuff that you could do with an agent and the right scaffolding right now is pretty wild. So,
Colin, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Like maybe something that you're working on or been playing around with that you're really excited about that you want to share?
Ooh, so many things. I think lately, like we've been using Clay quite a bit. The thing that I'm probably most excited about lately has been N8N and Clay living together. As a salesperson, having a ChatGPT is super helpful, but to do that for every one of your emails, that's challenging. And I'm sure there's going to be you can get Gemini to write some of your emails, but I find that really annoying. I don't think it's particularly well built. The thing that I've been playing with most lately is this tool called N8N. And it just lets you, it's a workflow tool, but it lets you take the bits of your email and bits of your calendar and bits of your docs and bring them all together and mush them into an LLM and then ask it some questions and structure the output and then put it back into Airtable. And I think it's invalidating the business model of so many of these AI and SaaS companies. Take Gong, for example, $300, $350 a user for call recording. I'm like, hey, I record my calls with Zoom now. N8N catches a webhook, and now I can get all your fancy analysis because all you are is a wrapper for ChatGPT or OpenAI. And so I don't need Gong anymore. I've got it myself. It's stored on my own Airtable. I've got it all, and I can recall it and I can do whatever I want with the data. And so I feel like we're in this really cool part of the internet where it feels like I'm building a GeoCities website again for the first time. And everybody's going, why the hell are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. It's ugly and it's janky and it doesn't quite work. And I'm like, because I can, and it's cool and it's fun and I will again, and nobody's ever going to visit it, but it's awesome. And I feel like we lost that for a while when SaaS, everything became SaaSified. And then there was all the models and the people spending a lot of money. And I do feel like we're at this point where the internet and starting a company is fun again. There's lots of opportunity. We're probably in one of those windows where, if you can figure out the right way to build the scaffolding to bring the workflow and LLMs closer together, you could probably rent out that scaffolding for a pretty good amount of money until the frontier model companies invalidate your business model by bringing that scaffolding into their platform. But it just feels like a fun and cool and interesting time to be doing things. So I check out N8N. Obviously, Clay is an amazing tool. You could do some really interesting market mapping things. Like their Clayagent tool is extremely powerful. If you're trying it out, I highly recommend using 4.1 mini, ChatGPT or OpenAI 4.1 mini as your Clayagent navigator. It is the right balance of cost and intelligence and conformity. It'll follow instructions and not go too off into left field and doing all these crazy things. And that's some of my favorite things is using Clayagents. I'll give you an example. I work with a lot of founders trying to find their first customers, build their first sales teams. A lot of those companies have to raise. And so I built this VC list. I just took every venture capitalist on LinkedIn, every VC firm and every VC I can find. And then I wrote a couple of Clayagents and I said, hey, go visit the website and find their list or portfolio companies. And then tell me what types of deals they do. Do they lead? Do they follow? Do they invest in, what stage do they invest in? Do they do series A, seed, pre-seed, etc.? And I did that with a couple of prompts and a Clayagent and about $1,000 in OpenAI credits. And that's a pretty cool thing to be able to build in an afternoon. And so previously, what was that, PitchBook? You had to go to PitchBook or Crunchbase or whatever and give them a good chunk of money. I remember getting quotes on PitchBook for getting some of that VC data back in the days, and it was not in the hundreds of dollars or even in the small thousands of dollars. It was many tens of thousands of dollars for unlimited access. And we're at this time where these tools are giving us that access again. And yeah, the ability to go and do things like that and stitch it all together in new and unique ways is just feels like a really fun time right now.
I'd give a caveat that I hope that people have the right amount of experience that it's as well as not instead of, because there is a layer of people that maybe have half the experience than the three of us do, where they've built these Clay agencies as like a 3-month SDR, and now they're trying to replace some of that targeting, which kind of is more hypothetical than what it should be. I'd want to make sure that they're still doing like a market validation process on top of finding that information. But cool thing that we came across was a version of Humanic. I don't know if you're familiar with Humanic, Colin, where they can do disc profiling at person level and account level. And now they can also do account mapping with their second product. It's not released yet, called Mia, which has got pretty funky levels of information that'll tell you why you could win, how you could win, what angle you should take, what decision makers you should talk to, buying committee, all of these things in one place as a report. We could put you in touch with their CEO if you'd like to have a chat. But yeah, we've got the demo of that, which is some pretty nifty level stuff. It can't get into the level of detail that we would obtain from speaking to them directly to get the market validation piece, like cataloging. Could get you everything beforehand and maybe 3/4 of what you're talking about from the Clay version, but maybe putting them together, you could almost weaponize your outbound to have those right conversations.
Exactly. This is one of those two things are true moments where it's still the right call to go and call people and email people to see, hey, is the time right? And it's also true that you can go and find these signals online. And some of them, and I'll be candid, I'm just as guilty of it as any others that play in Clay. There are times where I have spent 8 hours working on a play just because it's cool, not because it's going to add any value. That I'm excited about are almost always the duds. And you're like, wow, I put so much work into that and it accomplished nothing. Like I've done a couple recently where we used to use DOrg all the time or DiscoverOrg all the time. And I loved that tool. They did such a fantastic job of mapping the market, and they had a whole call center of folks dedicated just to doing that. I don't know if they got rid of the call center when they took over as ZoomInfo and became that, but I don't know if their org charts are as strong as they used to be. I know it's still a big piece of the platform, but I loved that part, especially if you're doing an account-based approach. And I always miss that. And one of the things I've been experimenting with lately is running multiple agents to go and look at a department within an organization in a few different ways, and then passing that information off to a decider agent and saying, hey, these are all the folks. Tell me what you think the structure of this organization is based on who reports to who, based on the publicly available data, and who do you think is my best in? And to be able to get a pseudo org chart off of a couple of clay scrapes is unbelievable, because I used to pay a lot of money. We used to pay 6 figures for DOrg back in the day to get that kind of data, and to be able to do it ad hoc whenever you want. And it's live and up to date. I mean, it's not 100% accurate because it's LLMs making their best guess based on what people's LinkedIn says. You can do a pretty good job by assuming a manager's a manager and a director's a director and a VP's a VP. And you're not going to get exactly the org chart, but you'll get the rough level, and the chances are the best path in, because you also get keywords on the LinkedIn profile. And man, you can do some damage with that data. So yeah, it's fun.
Very cool. That's really cool. Collin, I just want to take a step back and talk about something that you've shared publicly about how you've recently shut down Predictable Revenue's sales floor, which is a pretty big move. It was a pretty big business. It was a good chunk of revenue, and you've talked about it publicly. Why was it time to pivot or to shut down that business?
I hated it and it needed to die.
Tell me more. What did you hate about it?
The business model. The best case scenario for all of our highest quality startups, the ones with the most potential that went on to raise the most money and had the strongest product market fit, they were all customers for 6 months. And then they went, Collin, we really appreciate your help. Thank you so much. We just hired a sales development director, VP. We're going to hire 5 BDRs. We helped Uber start their first B2B sales team when they launched Uber Eats. They, after 4 months, said, thank you very much, shook our hand, paid a bill. It was a big bill. So I was very happy to have had the business, but they hired 100 BDRs and said, thanks. Like, where's the upsell opportunity? Your best customers say, thank you so much. We really appreciate your help. We just hired somebody. We don't need you anymore. And there's no opportunity to sell them anything further. And the companies that tend to hang out forever are the ones that need the most help. And it's not fun to watch your best customers churn away and your worst customers churn away and then just get stuck playing in the middle ground. And that's where we netted out. You're trying to optimize for doing cool things, and then you just get on this slippery slope of we grew the company too big, too quick, and got to a point where I wasn't doing great work. I didn't love doing it. I made a lot of mistakes in building out, pivoting from the agency to like the cold email agency to the SDR agency. I'm not happy with the way that I built that team, that program, that offering. Like, we had great people, we had great processes, but I think the mistake I made as a founder is I stayed at the executive level when we transitioned from cold email to SDR agency. And I think as a founder, when you think about like different levels of activity or like where you can be engaged in the business, everybody starts as an individual contributor. And that's where I started when I started the cold email thing. I figured all the things out. I wrote the processes. I built the scripts, or I copy pasted the scripts from Stack Overflow. Let's be honest. I put the Google Sheet together. I figured out the labeling system in Gmail and how to count the labels. And I figured out all of these things, and then I built the process, and I deeply understood how that worked. 5 years later, we had to make a pivot. And I had gone from individual contributor. I hired some ICs and I became their manager. Then I hired a bunch of managers and I became their director, leader, executive. And when we made the pivot, I stayed at the executive level, and I thought the ICs and the managers could make this transition. And that was false. I hired great people, and the only fault that any of them had was they weren't the founder of Predictable Revenue. And nobody's when you got to make a big grab the lion by its horns and twist moment in your company, there's only one or two people that can really do that. And they both carry the founder title. And I didn't do that. I said, I'm going to hire some smart people and I'm going to let them do that. Because I didn't want to. Two, I had like 3-month-old twin boys. And so I didn't have the brain space to do it. So I'm not making excuses, but in hindsight, that is one of the contributing factors. And I think the net of that was I didn't get in and build it my way. I didn't figure all the things out. I didn't put the effort in. And you could feel that the whole time. And I didn't know why it didn't feel right. The entire time I was running it, something was off. We had great people. We had great customers. We were running what looked like a really good process, but there was just a through line that was missing. And I think one of the pieces was the fact that I didn't understand and I hadn't been the person to put it all together and figure out how to go from old model to new model. And the whole time, I think our average customer lifetime peaked at 11.6 months. Our goal was 12 months. And maybe we crossed it temporarily for a month or two, but our average was stuck at 11.6 for a very long time. And then COVID came around and blew that to pieces. And we went from a healthy business that had 50 SDRs and was on track to our forecast at 120 SDRs by the end of 2020. We had just signed a big lease. We needed a lot more space. And then COVID came and just chaos ensued. And yeah, I think we dropped a third of our revenue in 6 weeks. Yeah, we had customers that just dissolved overnight. Our business model disappeared. We're going into bunker mode. And that chaos really threw us off. And then we rode the rebound when everybody got their checks and all the low interest rates and all that. And then 21, 22 kind of came around when everybody realized, hey, there's been a lot of free money lately, a lot of investing in sales development, and let's pull that back. And so it was just the long story short, it was a business where the model didn't make sense because your best customers churned, your worst customers churned, and your most medium customers stayed for a medium amount of time. And that slice of most medium is not something that a lot of companies aspire to. And they were always trying to get up and get out, or they were going the other direction. And so it wasn't fun. It wasn't producing enough value for our customers. And it was risky. We had a lot of people, and it is literally a treadmill where you got to set the machine to run at a certain point. You got to build the infrastructure to maintain a good service level at a certain number of customers. And if any of those variables change, customer lifetime, number of customers you're onboarding, or the amount that they're paying you, if any of those dramatically change, it throws off all your equations. You either have to accelerate or decelerate. And momentum shifts in a services business are very challenging. And it just felt like I was wasting my life not creating any value, lasting value companies. And we were making money, but I don't know. It wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel like it was great value. I didn't feel like it was a net positive. And so it had to die.
Collin, it's just so refreshing, again, hearing you talk so candidly about it, but also looking to find things that you enjoy doing more and giving up what is a good chunk of revenue, and I'm sure money that was in your pocket as well, to go and pursue something that you felt was right. And I think that's a really admirable quality. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for being so candid about it too.
Bravery and stupidity look very closely when you look at them under a microscope, I think.
Yeah, I think we're very similar for what we're trying to do.
That's right. We could have jumped on the bandwagon like everybody else, but it's not something that we really believed in. And so I think we've taken the longer route ourselves, which, maybe stupidity. We'll see. Collin, I want to talk about your book as well. That's out now. I saw you had hundreds of pre-orders as well, so I'm sure those books are being delivered to people right now, which is wonderful. It's the terrifying art of finding customers. What inspired you to write that now?
4 years ago, my board thought it would be a good idea for me to write predictable revenue too. And as I've shown in this podcast, I'm not very good at doing things that other people want me to do. And if I don't think they're a good idea, I'm not going to do them. And so I started, because I did agree that the book was old and outdated and people were taking pot shots, and I didn't like that. But I also wasn't very passionate about the space, given what I just said about the business. That's how I was feeling about it. And I started writing the book, and I had the 4 funnels idea, and that was the thing. That was a piece that was giving me energy. But I just couldn't see myself building a whole book around what I thought should be a blog post. I really don't like those books that should have been a blog post or like a PowerPoint keynote presentation. Like, there are some books where you listen to the guy talk for 10 minutes on YouTube. You're like, wow, this is the smartest person I've ever met. And then you read the book and you're like, wow, it's this person's talk, but stretched out over 200 pages. I hate you for wasting my life. And I didn't want to write one of those books. And so I started writing, and I was writing. My commitment to myself was I was going to write every Friday. And I ran into a friend of mine introduced me to a publisher, and we hybrid published with a company called Page 2. Trina over there is absolutely amazing. And she actually sent me this book called Write a Must Read. And after I read the book, it was so obvious. After, in hindsight, the advice, the ideas are exactly what you would expect Adem or I to tell you if you were trying to find your first customers, but in the context of writing a book. It was like, hey, so who's the book for? And what progress do they want to make? And like all these things that any of us would know are the right ways to start or to think about it, but in the context of a book. And then I basically went from reading that book to throwing out half the manuscript. And then through that, I realized that the ideas that I had that I thought were worth sharing were the 4 funnels, the idea that product market fit is not binary. It exists on a spectrum or a curve, and you can go from strong to weak, and that the strength of your product market fit is a multiplier of your go-to-market efforts. And I thought, these are ideas worth sharing. These are ideas worth putting effort around writing. And once I came to that realization, the rest of the book was just cooking. Like, I wouldn't call it easy, but compared to doing a startup, it was easier than doing a startup. It was easier than grinding for 18 months and not having a single customer. Because all you have to do is sit and write. And as long as you've got a good structure and you've got good advice along the way and good stories to tell, I'm not going to call it easy, because it was definitely not easy, but it was definitely not the hardest thing I've ever done.
You recommended that book when we last caught up, and I've actually started working through some of the principles. So thank you for recommending it as we prepare for Adem's book, or our book together, which features a lot of Adem, of course. One thing, of course, that's important and core to the book is the transformation that you want the ideal customer of your book to experience. And what is that you're looking for the founders who read this? What's that transformation, Collin?
I think the realization that product market fit can go from weak to strong. And that's going to have the biggest impact on your go-to-market. And that's the high level idea. And then the book that I felt was missing, that I wish I had when I started, because I started my life as a dirty sales guy. And then I learned product management and customer development and all this startup-y things. And I love the bomb test. And I'll give Patrick credit. He does try and draw a connection between customer development and sales, but there was nothing that really bridged the two subjects of, okay, you are looking for a gap in the market. How do you verify that? How do you validate that? And then how do you turn all that work that you just did into people that will give you a little bit of money in the near future? And what I wanted to do was, from a tactical perspective, walk people through that journey. And, hey, here's how I've done it multiple times. And sometimes the company I started was Voltage CRM and one person bought it. Sometimes it's Carb.io and we went 0 to $1 million in ARR in 3 months. And a bunch of other times it's been a variety of experiences in between. And so that was the piece of content that I thought was missing. That was the line or the dots that I wanted to connect, was like the customer development world and the sales world, and helping founders figure out how to to bridge from one to the next.
Amazing. I really like that. I think it's something that's very timely, needs to be written. I think from a marketer's perspective, I couldn't agree more. Product market fit is such a multiplier of your go-to-market efforts. The number of times a marketer has been on the wrong end of things because the product market fit there's only so much you can do. And to be honest, that used to be within the remit of marketing too, was like getting the information from the market to help inform the product. And trying to find better product market fit. I think that function has been taken away from a lot of marketers, but absolutely sits at the founder level for the people that you're speaking to. So a very timely book. Encourage people to go out, make sure you order it, The Terrifying Art of Finding Customers. Collin, where's the best place for people to go and check out that book?
You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Indigo if you're up in Canada. You can follow me on LinkedIn. But candidly, the best place to find more of our content is foundersedition.co. That's my weekly newsletter. I write that. I use GPTs to edit it because I became accustomed to the luxury of having a strong editor when I wrote the book. And I wrote a little GPT that edits my newsletters for me, and it's fantastic. And you can check me out at foundersedition.co, sign up to the newsletter. There's 130,000 founders that are all subscribed. And yeah, join me over there. Hit reply to the emails. I reply to all of them, anybody who replies, and I'd love to hear from you. If you bought the book, checked it out, I've got a bunch of pre-order benefits. You drop me an email with the screenshot of you buying the book, and I'll send you all the pre-order benefits.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Collin. Listeners, viewers, you've heard how candid Collin is. You've heard about all his experiences, how raw he is in sharing his lessons. If you want like a real no bullshit, refreshing approach, go and buy his book, go and follow his stuff. You'll absolutely love it. Adam, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we let Collin go and pick up his kids at all?
Obviously, we've come to the same conclusion as your funnels with what we've built with closed circuit selling. And just a little caveat from earlier, the market now might be ready for a different variation of the outsource model, but I think what's going to happen, or we're betting on it, is more of the pieces of market validation, marketing, and maybe even the CS function to be part of that model. Just like there was a company in Sydney, Melbourne that used to do a model like that, but I think the market might be ready for something like that now. But it's just, I think we're well towards it now.
Absolutely. Sounds like we might need a part 3. Collin, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. And Adam, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
Jets, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Cool.